Rome did not conquer the ancient world through chaos or brute force alone. It built a system where every victory generated wealth, and every piece of wealth made the next conquest easier, faster, and more profitable than the last. In its earliest years, Rome fought only to survive, defending itself against nearby tribes and rival cities that threatened its existence, with no intention of building an empire beyond the Italian peninsula. Repeated victories slowly reshaped Roman thinking, as leaders noticed that each successful defense weakened enemies while strengthening Rome's economy through seized land, captured labor, and access to new resources. What began as survival gradually turned into strategy, as Roman elites realized that expansion itself reduced future threats by pushing danger farther from Rome's core territories. Borders were no longer seen as limits but as opportunities, with each frontier promising new land, new labor, and new streams of wealth that could stabilize Rome internally. Rome learned that remaining static was dangerous, because rival states would grow stronger over time, while expansion ensured dominance and reduced long-term risks. This shift transformed Rome from a regional power into an expanding force, proving that conquest could be deliberate, controlled, and economically sustainable when guided by discipline rather than impulse. Unlike most ancient states, Rome expected war to finance itself, designing campaigns that generated immediate returns rather than draining the treasury. Victorious generals returned with gold, silver, valuables, and enslaved laboris, replenishing state finances while rewarding soldiers through shared spoils. Because soldiers were partly compensated through plunder, the financial burden on the Roman state remained lower than in armies paid entirely from public funds. If a campaign could not justify its economic cost, it was delayed or avoided, creating rare financial discipline in an era dominated by reckless warfare. Over time, Rome refined warfare into a system where conquest generated wealth, wealth funded infrastructure, and infrastructure enabled further conquest. Violence was transformed into long-term economic gain, allowing Rome to expand faster and more sustainably than rivals who relied on unstable tribute systems. Certain Roman conquests permanently altered the empire's economic structure rather than merely expanding its borders. The defeat of Carthage secured control of Mediterranean trade routes, allowing Roman merchants to dominate maritime commerce without serious rivals. Spain's vast silver mines provided consistent funding for armies and administration, anchoring Rome's financial strength for generations. Gaul contributed fertile land and manpower, while Greece added skilled labor, intellectual capital, and established commercial networks. Rome integrated conquered regions into its economy instead of stripping them temporarily, ensuring continuous wealth flow rather than short-term gain. Each strategic conquest strengthened the entire system, transforming Rome into a complex, resilient economic web spanning continents. Rome's road network was the backbone of its economy, enabling goods, information, and troops to move across vast distances faster and cheaper than ever before, transforming military conquest into sustained economic advantage. While commonly associated with military logistics, roads primarily reduced transportation costs, linking distant markets and urban centers, allowing trade to flourish and farmers to sell surplus far from local regions efficiently. Merchants expanded trade networks, taxes were collected efficiently, and information traveled quickly, allowing Roman administrators to coordinate economic and political control across provinces more effectively than rivals ever could. Infrastructure investment multiplied economic output far beyond initial costs, making roads a long-term strategic asset that tied provinces to Rome and ensured steady inflows of wealth and resources to the capital. Without roads, Rome's immense territory would have been unmanageable. With them, the empire functioned as a unified economic system rather than a collection of loosely controlled territories. Urbanization became a cornerstone of Rome's economic power, as cities concentrated labor, capital, and consumption, transforming administrative, commercial, and industrial hubs into engines of growth and efficiency. Cities enabled specialization, productivity, and large-scale taxation, while distributing goods efficiently and stimulating rural production through demand for food, tools, and services. Rome invested heavily in urban infrastructure, forums, aqueducts, ports, and warehouses, which reduced costs, increased output, and created lasting economic networks throughout the empire. Urban centers also reinforced Roman culture, law, and administrative cohesion, signaling stability to citizens, attracting migrants, and expanding the labor pool critical for economic and military expansion. At its peak, Rome's urban network supported cities larger than anything previously seen in Europe, transforming the empire into a complex and resilient economic superpower. Rome understood that infrastructure creates wealth before power, designing roads, bridges, aqueducts, ports, and warehouses not as vanity projects, but as strategic economic tools to maximize efficiency across the empire. Roads reduced transportation costs dramatically, allowing goods, soldiers, and information to move faster than in any rival system, transforming weeks of travel into days and expanding Rome's economic reach. Aqueducts supplied clean water to densely populated cities, supporting labor stability and productivity, while ports connected Rome to global trade routes, ensuring steady imports of grain, metals, and luxury goods. Infrastructure allowed the state to collect taxes efficiently and deploy military forces rapidly when necessary, turning physical construction into instruments of political and economic control. Rome treated maintenance as investment rather than expense, understanding that neglect would strangle economic flow, and binding distant provinces into a single logistical system that generated wealth, stability, and centralized control. Rome did not expand blindly. Each conquest was carefully managed to balance profit and risk, weighing potential revenue against administrative and military costs, ensuring new territory strengthened rather than strained the empire's economic and political system. Strategic frontiers were fortified to minimize long-term defense expenses, while client states were sometimes preferred over full annexation, allowing Rome to extract wealth without complete responsibility, extending reach while preserving stability. Expansion was paced to allow integration before further growth. Roads, laws, taxation, and administration were established first, ensuring territories became functional parts of the empire before new conquests began. This disciplined approach prevented early overextension, yet also created dependency as the empire grew accustomed to continuous inflows of land, labor, and tribute, quietly setting expectations that would later become burdens on the system. For now, Rome appeared perfectly balanced, expanding just enough to sustain wealth while maintaining control, but this illusion of optimal management masked underlying vulnerabilities that would challenge the empire in future phases. As Rome expanded, conquest alone could not sustain control. Administering wealth at scale required a complex bureaucracy to manage territory, population, and revenue efficiently across millions of citizens. Governors were appointed to oversee provinces, supported by tax collectors, legal officials, and military commanders, creating a structured hierarchy that ensured revenue and law enforcement flowed consistently toward the center. Census records estimated taxable populations, standardized laws reduced uncertainty, and merchants could plan trade knowing contracts were enforced, creating predictability that generated more wealth than brute force alone ever could. While corruption existed, Rome tolerated minor inefficiency as long as revenue flowed steadily, prioritizing reliability over perfection, turning conquest into continuity and provinces into permanent economic units. Roads, courts, and tax systems tied distant regions to the center, enabling governance of millions without revolt. Rome's true strength lay in organizing complexity rather than relying solely on military might. At its height, Rome controlled the largest integrated trade network the ancient world had ever seen, with goods flowing across land and sea consistently, linking provinces and cities into a single economic system. Grain, olive oil, wine, metals, textiles, glassware, and luxury items moved daily, while Rome acted as both engine and destination, ensuring wealth circulated continuously rather than remaining static. Ports connected maritime routes, roads linked inland regions, and trade created wealth beyond taxation, allowing merchants to accumulate fortunes, cities to prosper, and the state to benefit from customs duties and market taxes. Control of key trade corridors allowed Rome to influence prices and restrict rivals, while economic integration reduced fragmentation, making provinces dependent on one another and strengthening imperial stability. Trade also spread Roman currency, law, and culture, reinforcing unity across the empire. At peak efficiency, Rome resembled a modern economic system more than an ancient one, with wealth multiplying faster than expansion alone could achieve. By this phase, Rome had reached a scale unmatched in human history, with tens of millions living under a single economic framework and resources moving predictably across vast distances, sustaining permanently funded armies and flourishing cities across continents. This scale created immense power but also complexity, requiring coordination across military, economic, and administrative systems, where even small failures could produce large consequences if mismanaged. Rome mitigated risk through redundancy, diversification, and institutional control. Multiple grain sources reduced famine risk, diverse revenue streams stabilized finances, and legal uniformity minimized disputes, making the empire function like a vast, self-reinforcing machine. Growth slowed, but stability increased. Expansion was no longer urgent because the system itself generated wealth, yet complexity carried hidden dangers, as systems optimized for size were less flexible and required uninterrupted coordination to prevent catastrophic failures. Rome appeared invincible at this moment, with power reaching its maximum expression, yet the margin for error was shrinking, setting the stage for challenges that would test the empire's endurance beyond the wealth and control it had achieved. At its peak, Rome believed its power was permanent, but systems built for expansion struggled to adapt to stability, allowing hidden weaknesses to grow beneath wealth, order, and apparent security that seemed unbreakable to those living inside the empire. Rome had mastered growth on an unmatched scale, but sustaining power without constant expansion became its greatest challenge, revealing that true strength is not only built through conquest, but through the ability to endure complexity over time. Rome conquered the world economically and militarily, yet its real test had just begun. If you want to understand how empires rise, peak, and face their limits, subscribe now and continue this journey through history and power.